We don't know how to hold a conversation anymore. If someone doesn't agree with you, they are either an ex-phobic, a fill-in-the-blankist, or if you can't think of something to say because you never learned how to hold a conversation, you just call them a snowflake. Of course, people having a plethora of opinions is what keeps a functioning democracy afloat. However, these days, it seems that we have forgotten how to engage with opposing sides whenever a dire situation is rising.
To just be grossly generalistic, you could put half of Trump's supporters into what I call the basket of the poor.
Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us! Work for us! What's the penalty for treason? Death! USA! USA!
A black man who died after a police officer pressed his knee into his neck prompted hundreds of protests around the country where police met protesters with tear gas, violence and arrests. Now, many
when you see something beautiful and prices being apparently destroyed before your eyes.
Very strict to explain to Italians that they have to renounce their activities, to reduce their freedom to stay at home.
Tennessee Governor Bill Lee signed a bill banning drag performances.
Justice, radical left. Will you shut up, man? Listen, who is on your list, Joe? Who's on yours?
Right, gentlemen, I think
This is Senator Justice, radical left. Will you shut up, man?
Welcome to this episode of Phenomena of Our Age, the segment in which I delve into important things going on right now that I need some clarity on. We live in a very confusing era, and therefore it is important to have nuance and a clear mind when judging these phenomena of our age. If you are interested in this type of content, please like and leave a comment and subscribe. Also, tap the notification bell so you won't miss any of my content. This series was actually born out of the idea that we should always keep conversation open, and the vision for my channel is to create a space of healthy discourse between opposing sides. Having open conversation about touchy topics is what keeps society afloat. However, today it seems many have turned their backs on each other, not willing to engage in any healthy conversation with ideological opponents. What I mean by healthy conversation is not trying to one-up each other or trying to win a debate, owning the libs or showing them conservatives, but to see where other people are coming from and trying to understand opposing sides. Like functioning adults do. Although, considering the sheer amount of stupidity on the internet, I do understand why one would want someone to shut up already. Now, it is easy to assume that we are living in a heavily divided era. However, I hold rationality in high regard, so in order to find out whether my assumption is actually true, I have to answer a few key questions. First of all, what is polarization? Second, is the polarization we are facing worse than before? What are the effects and implications of said polarization? And lastly, can we find a solution to this polarization and this problem? Several papers have defined political polarization as having two distinct definitions. First, there is the ideological polarization, which is the, and I quote, divergence of political opinions, beliefs, attitudes, and stances of political adversaries. And then there is something called affective polarization, which is more about the identity of ideological groups and the attitudes it holds towards outgroups. It occurs when a subset of a population adopt increasingly dissimilar attitudes towards parties and party members and political ideologies. As has been established, these two types of polarization are called affective and ideological respectively. When polarization is low, people support a mixture of ideological attitudes. However, when it is high, large clusters of people become more consistent in their beliefs and have a lower tolerance for people holding different views. Whereas a low-level polarized society, people are able to disagree with an ideological stance without disliking the person.
Hitler not remind you of that? Does Trump not remind you of that? No, explain to me how Trump is like Hitler. Mass deportation.
Polarization is on the rise, and it seems to be the case all over the world. It has been observed that as media grew more fragmented, people are less willing to engage in conversation with political adversaries of the opposite side. This polarization is the case both ideologically and effectively. Now, the media is not all to blame in this regard. Some studies even suggest that social media especially can have a depolarizing effect, so it's not all doom and gloom. On one hand, a higher level of polarization could imply that more people are politically engaged and are participating more in the democratic process. Most research in regards to polarization has focused on the US, and the situation is dire, like very dire. Increasingly, people are willing to accept lower paychecks if that means they don't have to listen to the ideological yapping of the opposing side. And in general, people are more willing to exclude people with opposing political beliefs. This goes for many areas in life, like dating or where to live. Now, not only are Americans less willing to interact with political opponents, they are also motivated to overlook the flaws of their own ideologies and political standing points. The paper I have found outlines two scenarios in regards to the future of polarization. Now, it focuses on the US, but I think this goes for at least the West in general. In the first scenario, the US is basically doomed, and polarization gets worse and worse. In the second scenario, polarization has reached its apex, and polarization works like a pendulum. In this possible future, polarization is only bound to increase because of a self-reinforcing cycle. What happens here is that Americans overperceive the level of polarization and as a reaction will distance themselves from the opposing side, thereby actually doing the thing they fear, by creating more polarization and then again perceiving this overestimated polarization they themselves actually created, and that just goes on and on. Another important aspect is that Americans tend to overestimate the extremity of the opponent's co-partisans, not only politically but also morally. This is why liberals are seen as godless gender benders bound on creating a Satanist communist dystopia by conservatives, and conservatives are seen as theocratic racist KKK enabling Puritans by liberals. And the angry language we see online on spaces like TikTok and YouTube, of which it is known to garner more views and is more likely to gain a larger following, and lo and behold, polarization has gone worse. Basically, what this comes down to is that people are fed up with being polarized. People on both ends of the spectrum see polarization as something bad. This has two reasons. The first reason being that more polarization leads to more extreme policies which people aren't fond of. The second being that the consequences of polarization are viewed as unappealing. the quality of discourse has deteriorated. It features too many insults and less actual healthy debate. Many people actually prefer decency and civility rather than bullying behavior and berating the opposite side, and actually feel ashamed when their party engages in this type of behavior. And this piece of information actually somewhat restores my faith in humanity.
We just got new metrics in. Donald J. Trump is the president of the United States elect.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
United States president.
It is easy to see why the 2016 election might have been a turning point. However, research hasn't shown an increase in polarization. Americans showed no change in their preference of one's own party over the other. Pew Research conducted a poll on 10 political issues. On the issues of government business regulation, government waste, corporate profits, homosexuality, immigration, attitudes remained mostly stable. On other issues, welfare, helping the needy, addressing inequalities for Black people, military strength, environmental policy, participants' attitudes have grown further apart. Also, despite the fear of many that the consequences of polarization have increased, this hasn't really manifested. For example, Americans are no more likely to suppress unfavorable news about their party in 2017 compared to 2014. What is troubling, however, is the fact that the most destructive consequences of polarization are increasing. 5 to 15% look in favor towards violence against political opponents, and ideologically driven hate crimes have also increased. Now, we also have to address the elephant in the room, something that happened a few years ago, something long forgotten. I am talking, of course, about the C word.
The World Health Organization has officially declared the outbreak of the novel coronavirus, known as COVID-19, a pandemic.